One. Bryce Gayton from the Australian Electric Vehicle Association, and it's a very important topic, transport. Council's climate change webpage, there's information available about the estimated breakdown of Tweed's entire community's greenhouse gas emission sources, and fossil fuels burnt for transport contribute nearly 1/3 of our total carbon footprint. So we're really going to have to switch to alternatives to do our part in meeting global efforts to meet those net zero emissions targets. So it can't be understated the size of what's required. So electric vehicles are becoming increasingly viable as alternatives. So it's great that Bryce is here to share his wealth of knowledge on the topic. Bryce has been working and writing on electric vehicles since 2008. And his interest in EVs comes in part from his desire to lead a low environmental impact lifestyle, plus the fact that EVs are way cooler to drive than ICE ones. His latest EV drive is a Hyundai Kona electric, in which he has already covered 20,000 kilometres, a third of which has been interstate travel. Bryce's work is currently split between EV consultancy and the EV safety trainer supervisor for Melbourne University's School of Engineering. He is also Vice Chair of the Victorian branch of the Australian Electric Vehicle Association and editor of EV News, the national newsletter of the Australian Electric Vehicle Association. He regularly writes on EV topics for the Driven website and Renew magazine, and on behalf of both the association and Renew, he presents on EV issues and opportunities to government, businesses and community groups. And to our workshop today, through being a driver of EVs, qualified science, environmental education teacher and an electrician, Bryce is well positioned to discuss the all-round personal and environmental benefits of moving with e-emotion. So with that great pun, we'll move on to Brian's talk.
My name is Bryce Gayton, and I'm going to take you through a EV 101 session on what's an EV, what's an EV SE, what's a V2X, how do I charge my EV, will my EV go a distance if going interstate or whatever, and will it benefit the environment if I do buy one? As you can see, I'm from the Australian Electric Vehicle Association. I've been driving an EV for 8 years or more, been working on them for over 12, and hopefully I can bring some of those insights to the presentation today. Okay, first of all, I always try to remind people fleet electrification is coming in all forms. It's not just cars. I'll be focusing on cars today, but it's in everything. So your trucks, your bikes, your motorbikes, planes, flying cars, autonomous forms, buses, ferries, all of these things will be talked about, or given that this is being re-recorded, will have been talked about in the EV Vision conference that happened Friday, or is happening tomorrow in my case. And you'll be I'll leave it until a bit later when we get to the quiz time, and I'll throw some more tidbits about that. Okay, first of all, acronyms. I'm really bad with acronyms, so I better throw a few in. PEV is a plug-in electric vehicle. You'll hear that term used a lot in the car sales figures. And BEV, or battery electric vehicle, is your simplest electric vehicle. So it has your battery, electric motor, and that electric motor will be used to create energy to move the car, or as it slows down, puts the energy back into the battery to recharge it. Plug-in hybrid, a PHEV, has basically the same setup, but also a smaller battery coupled with a petrol or a diesel or a gas motor in order to drive it a bit further range. As the price of BEVs come down and PHEVs sort of hold their price, the BEVs will eventually overtake both the price of the PHEV and its range as the batteries get cheaper and larger. So I always regard the PHEV as an interim technology, waiting for the BEVs to become more readily available in price and market share. HEV is the ones that you've seen early in the piece, the Toyota Priuses and those ones that came along first, and they're effectively an energy saving addition to a petrol car. They don't have a plug and they only save energy as you're braking. So they'll save between 5 and 15% of your energy from petrol, but they aren't effectively not an electric vehicle as such, because they don't actually recharge and they can't run electricity alone. They, in fact, will be included in the sales bans that are coming up overseas in starting 2025 in Norway and 2030 now in England, 2030 in a number of other countries, and 2035, 2040. So it won't be long before you won't even be able to buy a petrol or diesel car anyway. And there's also the fourth car that I'm showing there, which is the hydrogen car or fuel cell electric car. I could probably go more on about that, but I don't see them as actually a particularly promising technology because they use about 3 to 5 times as much energy to go the same distance by creating the hydrogen and moving the car as it does to just plug it in and charge it using a battery. Anyway, I'll leave that one to another day. What's an EVSE? It's called an electric vehicle supply equipment and is basically nothing more for the AC types and automatic power point. So you can have portable ones, you can have BYO leads where you have a lead that you plug into a socket, councils, what have you like them, and you have your tethered lead ones. I've used a Tesla one there, but I often have used ones here at home before I change them over. I like playing with EVSEs, so I tend to change them from time to time. On your right-hand side, you'll see the DC fast chargers, and they're the ones you'll see on the highways or in some of the bigger corner sort of situations. I'll talk a little more about that in a minute. So there you have AC types and your DC types, and they're basically your car charger. Okay, V2X, vehicle to grid. You'll often hear that being bandied around, but people don't really understand it too that well because it's really not yet available. But first of all, V2H is part of that, and that's vehicle to home, and that's basically using the electricity from the car to power things in your house. So it's behind the meter. The power doesn't get out into the grid. V2G is vehicle to grid, and that feeds to the grid as well, like solar panels do as a grid connected solar panel system. V2X is the general term we use for those two types of system, and both of those access the electricity from the car via the DC connector in the car. Currently, only CHAdeMO, which is in Nissan, and pretty much nothing else now, though there were in Nissan, Mitsubishi, and a few others to begin with, but it's effectively a dying system and is becoming replaced by CCS. In fact, Nissan themselves are giving up the CHAdeMO system in their next EV model. So yes, you can do it in certain countries, not here in Australia yet. It's not approved for use here yet. So for V2X or V2G, and CCS is, however, being developed for it. And it's suggested that by 2025, I'll put that there, V2X systems and hardware will be available. So if you want to use your car to feed the grid or feed the house, that will be around the time to do it. Some systems are coming out for CHAdeMO later this year, early next year, when they finally approve them. Okay, how do I charge is a question I often get asked. Okay, the key point of difference is its refueling paradigm is different. It's now plug and ignore mobile phone. Come in, plug it in at home when you get home like a mobile phone, and you don't have to do any more to it till you walk out the door the next morning. So I say I don't have to wait around for charging. It takes me 20 seconds, 10 seconds when I get home to plug it in and 10 seconds to unplug it when I leave. You no longer have to find, stop, and act as your fuel pump attendant to your car whilst you're refueling. The key, though, is it is a different paradigm. So it's different speeds for different situations. And that looks really complicated. And I've deliberately put it up as a complicated table because all you need to know is what am I going to plug into, what that will give me as a maximum kilometres charged per hour, and what sort of car am I driving. So I own a Hyundai Kona. I simplify that table down to that. And that's pretty much what I just sort of have in my head. For people that are not quite so mental arithmetic enthused about, they can keep this little table or make one up and it's theirs in the glove box. And what you do is just work out what sort of outlet you're plugging into, how much current you're going to be drawing from it, so it gives you that much charge per hour, and then how much did you want to get to. So if you're looking at the highway ones, if you plug into a big charger, you'll get 80% charge in about 55 minutes. Whereas at home, if I plug into an ordinary power point, it might take me 28 hours, but I might only want 15 Ks to get me to a DC charger. So I drop it on a mate, plug in for an hour. So it's pretty quick. But it's a very different model, but it is very simple and you don't have to go to a petrol station. I really don't miss going to petrol stations anymore. So this is the key question. How fast do I need to charge? If you're only doing less than 200 Ks in a day, a power point will do it. You'll be pretty much recharged in less than 8 hours. About $500 to put in a good heavy duty power point. By the way, don't use it as your primary charging method because this is what can happen. You really need a proper EVSE for your primary charge. Power points are fine for general occasional charging, but not every time. If you're going to be doing lots of Ks, or I have one of these at home, it will charge me fully overnight as per that table earlier. Okay, now second part of this session is, does an EV go the distance? Okay, some people say it's early days. After all, the first petrol pumps were introduced just after World War I. This was 25 years after the first internal combustion engine vehicles arrived. After that, or before that I should say, they were only 2-gallon tins. On the other hand, our friend Scott Morrison brought to us during the last election campaign, electric vehicle policy will be, actually I should start again. Shorten wants to end the weekend. And that was, they're going to ruin the long weekend if Shorten's policy comes in and there's a mandate for trying to get more EVs on the road. Well, I came up with this and said, challenge accepted, and created the long weekend tour last year. So I drove around Victoria, 2,400 Ks, 7 days. Car did brilliantly because it's easy to charge even without the DC fast chargers being available on that route. And I could get around. I didn't charge during the day. I just popped into caravan parks. I was doing 300-400 Ks a day. And for a long weekend, you're not going to be doing that. The car did brilliantly. I was buggered by the end of that. It took me about another week to get over it. But I think I proved the point. It didn't ruin your long weekend. Now, just barely a year later, they're the charging network that's available, a DC fast charging network that will give you those faster charge times. And as the cars evolve, they're getting faster and faster with charging. The Porsche Taycan, for instance, will do pretty much a 300-400K charge in, I think it's about 10 minutes. So, and given that, I'll talk a little more about it a bit later, most of your charging is not done on the highway, it's done at home when you do that 20 seconds I mentioned earlier. It's getting far and far much easier. For instance, I did a trip up to Sydney late last year as the network was rolling out, and I visited some friends over in Coffs Harbour just as the bushfires were breaking out further down south along the coast. So I had a quick look at a map just like this called PlugShare and went, oh yeah, there's charges at Tamworth and Dubbo and down inland a bit. I was home from Coffs Harbour in 2 days in a full electric car. So as that network rolls out, pretty much your fuel pumps are already around 90-95% of population areas of Australia, and those fuel cans, otherwise known as power points, are all over the rest of Australia. So go for it. The future of EV charging will be, well, as I said, 80-90% of charging is done at home. So 20 seconds, unplug in the morning, plug in at night, off you go. Charging at work, if you want to top up, whatever big solar panels you can have, if your employer is quite aware and moving in that direction, you can get some really good, completely carbon-free charging done that way. There'll be community chargers going. That is one down in Cape Patterson, down in Victoria. There will be the networks, as in Tesla is one of them, and they're putting in a really good network all around Australia and the world. There's the NRMA, the community networks, throwing them in. That, by the way, is an extremely bad example of where to cite one, but that's a whole story attached to that one. And of course, there's the public charging networks where you pay to charge just like a petrol station, and that is in fact just south of the border in Victoria, and is set up next to one of the big petrol stations there, big roadhouses. And that's what will be the future of petrol stations. Around suburban areas, as I keep saying, if 90% of charging is done at home, 90% of petrol stations should start getting very nervous because people just won't be going there anymore. They'll be doing their charging at home. On the other hand, the road stations, the roadhouses, will do probably better than they used to because people will be staying an extra 5 or 10 minutes longer than they used to. But that's all it adds. I don't actually find, if I'm taking the normal sort of breaks I should every 2 to 3 hours, that an EV slows me down at all compared to when I was driving my internal combustion car interstate. Okay, and as I mentioned, EVs will benefit you in the environment because, pardon me, you'll end up with less carbon emissions being put out, even if you just charge off the grid. I'll leave people to read this in their own time. They can download this presentation, or they can email me for a copy of it. This is basically comparing a BMW i3 to a new Corolla. And as you can see there, you can get significant reductions, say in Tasmania, 1/4 of a tonne versus 2 tonnes in the Corolla for 10,000 kilometres of carbon dioxide equivalent. Even in Victoria, it's 1.64 driving around town versus 2 tonnes driving the Corolla around. So even if you're driving on the grid, it's improved. If you're driving with solar panels or subscribing to green power, it just gets better and better. Okay, if you want to find out more, I would recommend joining us at the AEVA. It costs the enormous sum of $50 to join, and you get lots and lots of information and data. You can actually get fact sheets. They're 2 pages comparing all the sheets as standard format. You can get 60 to 70 page quarterly e-magazine that we put out. There's access to all of the members who can find who've been driving around like myself, and lots of other things. So anyway, I think that's about the end for me.
So a couple of questions have come in. One, you mentioned the range of countries that are working towards prohibiting the sale of internal combustion engines. Is the conversion of traditional engines to electric engines a viable option?
I generally say for day-to-day drivers, no. It costs more to do that for a car with lesser range and less quality than buying even a good second-hand car now. And even the new ones, by 2024 onwards, the price parity with petrol cars will be reached for the start of the market. And by 2028, pretty much everything will be, and the ones that hit there first will be cheaper than an internal combustion car because they just are inherently cheaper to build.
Great, and that might help you answer Brian's question there, which is there any marketplace for second-hand EVs?
Yes, or not, there's no specific one. You can go to carsales.com, click on fuel type, click on electric, and that will throw up all just electric cars for you. And if you go to AEVA, there's also a for sale section in our forums. There's also in our newsletter a general listing of for sales that people put in for me.
So leading on from that, if you do buy a second-hand electrical vehicle, how do you know how much life will be left in the battery?
I would recommend, given there's only a couple of minutes left, to download actually my presentation at the EV Vision conference, which is all about that, on how to check second-hand EV batteries with aftermarket apps and your mobile phone.
Excellent. Good advice.
Leaf Spy is the main one if you want to just type that in the Google search engine.
And of course, there is a much greater range of vehicles coming out now, and that will, as you say, Bryce, increase, and the price parity will certainly move along.
There was one question someone put in, and I said I'll answer it live. And what was it about? Would you want three-phase power at home?
Yes.
As you saw, that table that I gave earlier showed with a 32 amp or a 7.4 kilowatt charger, you'll get a Mycona will charge overnight in 9 hours. That would be from 0 to 100. So you really don't need three-phase at home if you're doing normal sort of Ks. If you're doing something insane like 400 Ks in the morning and you get back in the afternoon and want to charge up and do it at night, you'd need almost, for a Kona, you'd need three-phase anyway, a DC charger, because it only does single phase. So not many cars do three-phase. Teslas do, BMW i3 does, trying to remember the other ones. There's a couple of other, Renault Zoe does three-phase.